Hello.
Hi.
Welcome back to the Unbounded Artistry podcast. What are we going to talk about today in episode number 3?
We are going to talk about studio space.
What about studio space?
Having it.
What about having studio space?
Having it and using it.
What about having and using studio space?
Have it and use it wisely.
Oh, so basically using it effectively and efficiently.
Sure, that's right.
Yeah. So let's start off with our studio and kind of talk about how that kind of evolved as we took on more projects and expanded into other platforms.
Okay, great. Let's do that.
So when we first moved in here, our studio was basically unusable for, I'd say, 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
We definitely didn't account for how much stuff we had because we were getting stuff from the apartment, and then we're getting stuff from Rose's family, and then we're getting stuff from my family, and we didn't realize how much that all added up to. So we had boxes literally stacked to the ceiling for quite a long time. It took much longer than I anticipated to have that all unpacked and organized.
We look like we were living in an episode of Hoarders.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
It was really upsetting.
Like, we would end up clearing out one room, like the living room area or the dining room area, and in order to do that, all the stuff would end up coming into the studio. And then we'd finally have time to arrange and clean the studio, but then all the stuff in here went back out to those rooms. So it was like a never-ending battle of where the stuff was going to end up.
Yeah.
Until it finally was sorted out, and we had a garage sale, and we donated a lot of stuff. And now we are good.
Mm-hmm. It was still a big evolution of this room and this space. We moved into this house knowing that we wanted to have a studio space. So we knew it was something important to us, so we picked the biggest room of the house to be the studio. Most people would want a master bedroom, but we
got a master studio.
Yeah. You don't have to have a dedicated room if you don't have it, but you want to have a dedicated area of where you're going to be productive and where you're going to do your art and your work, and that's basically what this is about. And finding something that's going to suit your needs for whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have a dedicated space to do your work, because if you're anything like us, when you come home from work after a long day, the last thing you want to do is to have to clear out an area to finally sit down and do additional work, because just that task of cleaning up more stuff just to start what you want to start is going to be a barrier.
Yeah. When you're coming home and you're tired, and for us, we were trying to launch our business and stuff, so basically you're coming home from work to basically work your second job, and you're tired already, and if it's not something that's ready to go and inviting to come into, you kind of just sigh and you're just I'll get to it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, and you just keep putting it off, and it's not something conducive to
being successful.
Yeah. I would say so.
Yeah. It's just so much easier to say, I'll do it later.
Yeah.
Than it is to actually dig into a project or your hobby or whatever you want to put your time into.
Yeah, and we've rearranged this area multiple times, and when we first moved in, we just had to kind of use whatever furniture we had to put the room together, and try to find space for everything and try to create a productive area. It was a little difficult. We started out with my humongous dining room table in here that basically took up the entire room. And it was basically just that and a bunch of chairs, and we had everything on it and around it, and it kind of worked for what we were doing at that time, because we were just basically doing our graphic design work at that point. So it kind of worked for what we needed it for. But as things changed, we had to change like how things were arranged and like where we were doing our work, and keeping space available for all the different things that we wanted to do. So we moved things around quite a few times.
Yeah, because we started picking up other things that we wanted to do with the business. Like we wanted to get into like the YouTube thing, and a big thing with that is we wanted to have like a really good backdrop and something like that's clean, interesting. And I don't know if we're quite there where we want to be yet, but it's just kind of like it's just always in progress. You always want to do better. So it's something that we're always working on, and this is our latest attempt.
Yeah. Yeah. If you go back and look at our old videos, like you're going to see that humongous dining room table, and then basically us sitting at the table. And then I think we moved it around and we had the table facing a different way and we rearranged stuff. And then at one point, we decided to get rid of the table because it was taking up way too much room.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up ordering some nice desks from IKEA for all of our stuff. And that helps because that made a lot more space in here. So then we created like another area with like a backdrop where we had like curtains and our bookshelf, and then we got some beanbag chairs and a little coffee table, and we started using that because it was nice because we did have a lot more space now that the huge table was out of there. And our desks are set up so that they're like around the perimeter of the room, so there's a big open area in the center, so that worked. But some of the things that we are now moving towards, we want to have more flexibility. We want to have more variety of like what we can do. So then we did a whole new revamp of the studio this past weekend.
Yeah, this one took 3 days. So it was all day Friday, all day Saturday, and then all day Sunday. And it took a lot of moving stuff around and just seeing how everything kind of fit into its own space. But our ultimate goal was to have kind of the flexibility to have multiple shooting areas for backdrops. And I think we accomplished that. I mean, there's still some fine tuning to do, but I think we got about five solid like backdrops that we can kind of go to, and that's a lot better than just our one with the bookshelf.
Yeah, we wanted things to be more interesting in the background, and we also wanted to have like dedicated spaces for different things that we're doing. So like if I'm working on jewelry, or if we're working on painting, or if we're working on doing drawings and illustrations and stuff like that, like having like different areas that you can kind of just sit down and start working. I think we've got that, but it definitely needs some tweaking just because we're still experimenting, finding like the right angles and the right setups and getting the right backgrounds in like the camera shot. I've heard a lot of people saying that they design their rooms like in camera because you want to make sure that it might look great in person, but then when you go to shoot it in camera, it doesn't necessarily translate. So you have to kind of make some adjustments, which we found earlier today.
Yeah.
So we had to make some adjustments to what we initially thought we were going to be using. So there's still a lot of work to do as far as that goes. But I think we're definitely heading in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, like, it was a nice opportunity to kind of go through all of the equipment and materials that we do have and kind of purge things that we don't necessarily need and just keep the important things. Being a creative person, you just kind of want to take anything that will be shiny and new that you can like create with, and we ended up with way too many things.
Not only that, but a lot of times we ended up with stuff that we thought we would end up using, and then it kind of just sat around for many, many years. So we were just like, you know what, it's just time to like ditch it
Yeah.
or recycle it or.
And I think that's part of the issue with not having a productive space to work in, because like you can have all these like great ideas like, oh, I'm going to totally use this for this, and you're collecting things and you're like, I'm going to make this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to create this, but then you don't have like a space where you can just kind of sit down and do it. So then things just start piling up because you're like, you have all the best intentions, but it just never happens. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we really kind of focused on in our new studio redesign is a balance between like the YouTube stuff and just functionality as well.
Yeah.
Like it's really difficult to in one room have all these different things going on and still be functional but still look good for YouTube.
Yeah. For sure. And we wanted everything to be easily accessible. The way that we had it set up before was absolutely not. Like a lot of things were like, I'm not going to work on this because it's just too much of a hassle to like get to the materials that I need. It's still kind of like that just because we don't have a ton of like storage space.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely a lot better than it was because we wanted things to be easy to just jump into and then jump out of.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, we would have multiple studios for multiple things and then there'd be room for everything.
Yeah.
But I think how big is our room? It's like 23 by 23 or something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Sounds
So
about
it's
right.
not a huge room, but it's working out for us.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that we run into is we don't focus on just one thing. We're not just photographers. We're not just designers. We're not just painters. We're all of it. So,
And more.
yeah, because we have so many things that we do, it's really difficult to get all of our materials and all of our workstations in one spot, and then also add in the factor of having it like set, like have it like designed as like a set for like YouTube basically.
Yeah.
It's very hard. So it's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. I think it'll always be a work in progress.
Yeah.
Because you always want to improve and you always learn new things and you want to change things up and
Yeah,
come across more interesting things.
for sure. I'm really happy with how it came out. We might on our Unbounded Artistry page, like YouTube page, we might have like a video of like an actual tour of like the changes that we've made. So if you're interested in that, we'll link that below. Or in the description. I don't know where it gets linked on a podcast.
Yeah, it goes in like the show notes.
Yeah, so we'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah.
But I forgot what I was gonna say. I lost my train of thought. Oh, I'm happy with how it came out because some of the things that we ended up doing in here, I didn't think this would be the final outcome, but I really like it. We talked in the last podcast about using what you have and not like spending money on like stuff that you can't really afford. And at one point we were kind of debating like, do we get new shelves or do we get new storage spaces or do we do this, do we do that, like what do we need? And then we're like, why don't we just try to upcycle the stuff we already have? One of the big pieces in our room was the bookshelf, and it was like a really dark wood and it was very cluttered. Like it was neat and organized, but there was just so much stuff in it that it wasn't very visually pleasing.
Yeah, it wasn't very interesting to look at. It just looked like a bookshelf.
Yeah.
That's just filled with books.
Yeah, so we ended up pulling everything off of it and going through what we had, what we wanted to keep, what we didn't want to keep. what we thought would be important to display as like a backdrop, and I painted it multiple times. Like changed the color and just changed like the textures on it and stuff like that, and we finally came out with something we really liked. And then we kind of took our time and carefully picked. I'm like looking, if anybody's like watching the video, I'm like looking off into the distance because I'm looking at the bookshelf. But we carefully selected everything that was put on the shelf and like how it was arranged and stuff like that, which was fun too because it's like another way to like be creative. So for me, I really like upcycling old furniture because I feel like it's just like another piece of art, honestly. Like I just think it's something fun to do, and it's nice to like create something new out of something old. So I really enjoyed that process.
Yeah, it took a lot of coats of paint for
Yeah.
you to finally get stuff to kind of stick down.
Yeah. Well, because we were kind of experimenting with, like, do we want it to be, like, a darker color or a lighter color? Not darker than it was, but, like, we had a really, really light shade of gray, and then I tried, like, a darker shade of gray, and then I tried having everything just be, like, one solid coat, so it just looked like a new piece of furniture, and then I didn't really like that look, and then, like, some of the stain, I think, was, like, bleeding through.
Yeah.
So then I was like, maybe I should just do like dry brush on it and try like to antique it. And I started out with that, and then I ended up like kind of doing like a, I don't even know what to call it, kind of like a rag texture. And just kind of did like this like texturized rusticy kind of look to it, and it came out really nice. I'm really happy with how it came out. So it's nice to create something like that and use what you do have, make something new out of it, and then you have something like a unique piece of furniture that nobody else is going to be able to like go pick up or buy somewhere. So it's nice. So I
It's
encourage
lovely.
you to recycle things that you think you like want to get rid of, or if you think you want to buy something, be like, what can I use that I can fix up and make something new?
Yeah, like a fresh coat of paint actually goes a long way. Like we have a lot of things that look like really kind of outdated and kind of rugged, and then like you just put a fresh coat of paint on it and it looks so much more modern, and you get like some nice hardware from like Home Depot or Lowe's or
Yeah.
even Amazon.
Yeah, just like some kind of like home improvement store, and then you can like really change the appearance of things that are old pieces, but like they look new and they're very unique and they look great. And then you're proud of yourself because you're like, yay, look what I made. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very lovely. But yeah, we'll have to do a tour, and then you'll actually be able to see the bookshelf and the items that we chose to go on it. And I think a big thing with choosing things for the background comes to like things that also kind of tie into like your interests and your hobbies, and it just gives like a little bit more of like your personality without
Yeah.
like us actually having to say anything.
Yeah, like it's stuff that's important to you, and then kind of things that are personal to you that you love, and also things that are visually pleasing for the audience to look at. And honestly, for you to look at, because it's the stuff that you put around you in whatever workspace you do end up having should be something that's inspiring to you and something that makes you feel good and something that makes you ready to like start creating and like doing things.
Yeah, you always want to make your work area like really inviting. You want to make it like a place that you want to go to after work. You don't want to make it like some like super like sterile environment. Well, I mean that might work for some people, but you, I mean that really depends on your personality.
Yeah.
But you just want to make it someplace that you want to go to and just start working.
Yeah, like I know for myself, like if things are like really cluttered and like a mess and stuff like that, like I absolutely don't want to like do anything. I don't want to be creative. Like I want to get away from it because it stresses me out, or I'll end up just like cleaning, and that's all I end up doing because it takes up so much of your time.
Yeah, I think that's another important thing is to just always make sure. I think we touched on it earlier, but just make sure like your area is always like clean.
Yeah. And it's just like you want it to be like ready to go, because if you have to keep cleaning things up and moving things around, and like there's some setup that's required if you're doing things like YouTube videos and stuff like that. But for the most part, you want it to be easy, because it's just eating into your time that you can actually make stuff and be creative. And it's just distracting. And it's just, like you said before, it's just like a barrier for getting to that spot where you're like in that like creative zone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're aiming for. We're not quite there yet, but
definitely getting there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very happy with it. It's just so much work this weekend.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I did not expect it to take that long. But that's the other thing too is, that coming up with how you want stuff set up is probably not going to happen instantly. It's going to take many revisions, and it's going to take a lot of work to figure out what works and what doesn't. I mean, we're probably 80% happy with what we have right now. So we're going to keep pushing ourselves to like fine tune it, and maybe it has to change even more than what we initially think. But it's just something that's always a work in progress.
Yeah. I don't know. I think like for the most part I like it, but like the other thing is like the in-camera piece, like when it comes to like how it actually like works when you go to actually use it for its purpose can completely change from what you initially thought. Like the angle that we're shooting in right now is totally different than what we were originally going to do for the video version of the podcast. We were going to do it in a totally different like way, and then when we went to go shoot it, we're like, yeah, that does not work.
Yeah, like you can kind of see over here to my right, we were gonna have the table straight in front of the guitars and the Unbounded Artistry logo, but the way that the camera kind of crops everything, you can't get like anything above like this part here.
Yeah, it would either be just like directly on our faces and like a blank wall, or you can see the logo and you can't see our faces.
Yeah,
so we're like, and we're gonna have to adjust. Yeah,
so since we're shooting on an iPhone, we don't have a whole lot of flexibility. So like if we had like a DSLR, maybe there'd be some type of lens that would work better, like a certain focal length or
But even then, like I feel like that would have a lot of like adjustments that would need to be made and like playing around with. And then I don't know, like when we were like looking at stuff through the camera, there's things that you're like, I'm not really crazy about how the lighting looks, like what can we do to play around with the lighting. And we don't have like professional lighting. We have like stand-up lamps that we just have like, like the lamps with the three like swivel heads or whatever you want to call it. And then we're just like pointing them in different directions and like trying to see like what colors pick up the best and stuff like that, and just kind of playing around with the things that we do have access to right now. So like you want to play with like the lighting and then like the audio and like all the different components to make like whatever you're making, like if you're making a video and stuff like that. And then like even if you're not into doing that and you're just like having a workspace for drawing, like you want to make sure that the things that you have around you are like all of your drawing materials are accessible, that they're organized, that you can kind of just like be in your flow, and then you can just kind of grab whatever materials that you need, which is kind of what we did with our drawing desk area and stuff like that. And we originally had things like in like little bins, which we thought was effective, but then we ended up changing it where we have like pencil and pen holders and stuff, and it's all right next to the drawing desk immediately. So you can just kind of grab and go with whatever you have near you, which I think is going to work a lot better.
Yeah, it's all sorted by, types of markers and colored pencils by like shades, and it makes it just a lot easier just to grab and just use rather than, digging into a bin trying to figure out what color you need. they're kind of all just right there for you to see.
Yeah. Like whatever you can do to make it easier for you to create and not like stop your process. That's what you want to aim for.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, even like when we did our shelves, we put stuff on the bottom, which is really hard to get. Like we put the stuff that we don't really use frequently down there. And then we put, like, as you go up higher, we put things that are used more and more frequently. And then the stuff that we use a lot is actually, like, at the top shelf. And then we have a shelf across the top, too.
Yeah. Like, we made the things we use the most, like, the most easily accessible things. And then the stuff that we don't really need, we kind of just put that, like, we could organize everything by, like, priority.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's definitely helpful, especially when you're working with like limited space.
Yeah, because that way you don't spend time digging for the bin that you always use at the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just makes a lot more sense.
The other thing too is if you're like us and you have like a ton of supplies and things like that, really take the time to go through all of your stuff, because we've discovered that we have multiples of certain things and not enough of others, because you forget sometimes like what you actually have, and then you go and you buy more or you collect more or whatever it is. So like our rock collection and our seashell collection is out of control. Like we don't have enough room.
What about the sea glass?
The sea glass collection also completely out of control. Like insane. Like those 3 things are like overflowing. Like we have way too much.
But we were like, oh, we're gonna make so many things with these, and then we haven't really made anything with them.
It's like you have the best, like that was what we were talking about before. You have the best intentions, like you're gonna go and create all this stuff. So of course you like, plus honestly, like one of my favorite things to do is like go like beach combing and finding stuff. So it's just an enjoyable pastime for us as well. But then we end up like having to find everything and take everything and like sort everything, and we have just like bins and bins and bins of stuff, and we don't have enough space for it. Like that's what's taking up the majority of all of our space, honestly. So I want to say that we're going to stop collecting, but we probably won't. I think at that point, like, we just have to really focus on, like, producing stuff with it.
Yeah, we gotta produce stuff faster than we collect it.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen, though.
That would be the ideal situation.
That would be the ideal situation.
But there are things that we come across that we like for ourselves, so they just go in our personal collection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So... But pay attention to, like, what you do have and what you don't have, so that you don't end up with, like, way too much of one thing and not enough of another.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to not frequently, but, like, every so often, like, if you have bins of things, just to go through them, make sure that nothing is leaking, and that there's still stuff in there that is... like good, because there's a few things that we had that went bad that you can't use, so
yeah,
just want to keep an eye on your supplies.
Yeah, things that you don't use as often. Like we were going through, like we have different bins for like jewelry making and drawing and painting and stuff like that, and like the things that we use all the time are out, but then we have like things that we don't use as often in the bins. And when we were going through my jewelry bin, we realized that my resin had spilled inside there, because we opened the lid and Bryn's like, this smells toxic, and I'm like, that's because it is.
And then she ran off and started washing her hands for like,
well, because I just
5
reached
minutes
in there, and then like I just like my hand came out covered in resin, and I was like, oh no.
She washed her hands for 5 minutes, and I'm in here with paper towel and some spray trying to like clean up all the resin on the bottom. It's like all over my hands, and meanwhile she's still scrubbing away at her hands. I'm like, well, I hope this stuff isn't super toxic, because I'm like covered in it.
It's not terrible, it's like really irritating to your skin.
Well, thanks. That's fine.
Luckily I didn't lose a ton of it, because I would be sad if I like lost a lot of my resin material, but
Yeah. So
Not that I've used it recently, obviously, but I need to start.
yeah, so all I had to do was just tighten the top a little bit, and then I made sure that when they're in the bin, they're not on their side, so they're just standing straight up.
Yeah.
That will help eliminate leaking.
Pro tip.
Yeah.
The other nice thing too is like when you're going through like your supplies and stuff like that, and you come across things that you forget you have, it kind of like re-inspires you, and you're like, oh, I forgot I had this, I want to work with this. Like pull that stuff out and like pull it aside and just like actually make time to like use it and make stuff out of it. That's definitely something that we have to do. We still have work to do in the studio, and we still have like a lot of spaces that we have to like finish putting things away and clearing up. But once they are done, now that things are like more accessible, there's definitely some projects that I want to jump into.
Yeah, because now we have like, well, we will have like 3 tables that are basically going to be empty, like tabletop wise. There's just going to be like very few things on them because we're going to need to shift them around depending on where we're shooting. So we want to keep them very clear.
Yeah, that's actually working out to our benefit. It was difficult because we had to like find space and where we're storing all of the stuff that was sitting on the tabletops. But now that they're clear, we actually have like a workspace to like actually do stuff on.
Yeah, and then even if it's something needs a while to dry, we have like alternate spaces that we can hop to if we need to. So
Yeah,
definitely good.
it's going to be really good, at least for production. And then we'll figure out the rest when we get to it, like when we want to shoot in different areas and stuff like that. We'll just have to kind of play around and tweak. And we were kind of talking about like if we know like some things need to be moved to a certain spot, we're going to get like some gaff tape and like tape like little X's on the floor or something like that, so that we know exactly where we're placing stuff, just to make it that much faster. So it's just really efficient, and then you just kind of can do the same thing, jump in, jump out, like when you have to set things up and break things down and stuff like that. Like the quicker that you can do it and the easier you make it on yourself, the more likely you are to actually like do the thing and then produce what you need to produce.
Not only that for like the marking the floor, but also just to give more consistency too.
Yeah.
Because you kind of keep the same shot. I mean, within reason, it's not going to be exact, but you're more likely to get very close.
Yeah. I think that'll definitely be helpful. Yep.
Do we have anything else for the studio stuff?
I don't know. I think that was mostly it. Just kind of being organized, playing around with things, and then like don't just settle on like you're like, okay, this is the setup. It's working. It's okay. I like it. There's always things that you can improve on. There's always things that you can change. So don't just settle for whatever you have. Like try other things, move things around. Look, I can't even, this past weekend, I don't even know how many different like combinations of things we've tried and moved things around like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Until we came up with like how it's set up now. Yeah. And it's still probably not done. We're still probably going to like move things around, and sometimes you think something's gonna fit somewhere and it'll fit, but it doesn't look right. Like the bookshelf we moved around like 1,000 times, and I was like, it'll fit here, but as soon as like you put it in that spot, you're like, yeah, that does not work. So it'll just kind of give you an idea of like where things will fit in the room, and then like what you can move, what you can't move, what you need to work around. So just always keep trying and moving things around and trying to improve stuff. And don't be afraid to get rid of stuff either.
Yeah.
Let it go.
I agree. Well, I think that kind of wraps up everything that we have for this episode. With the holiday season right around the corner, we are going to take the holidays off. So we won't have a podcast next week, but starting in the new year, we will be back with episode 4.
Yeah. We're excited for the new year. We've got a lot of good things on the horizon, so.
Yeah, we have a lot of big things that we want to work on, and I'm super excited.
Yeah, me too. This is a nice start. Making like a new workspace and like a new like studio space for yourself is definitely a nice start, especially like right before the new year. Like, start
Yeah.
off on the right foot.
Yeah, I think we got a head start on the New Year's resolution.
Yeah.
So,
Nothing wrong with that.
yeah. So we hope everyone has a great holiday and a happy new year.
And we'll see you in 2019.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy to say. Mm-hmm. This year went by so fast.
Yeah. I'm glad it's over. It was a rough year for us. So hopefully we won't have a rough year in 2019.
Here's to a good 2019.
Yes.
So,
thanks again for listening. We appreciate it.
and you can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Stitcher. And of course, if you're watching, on YouTube.
Thank you again. We'll see you in the next one, and may your artistry always be unbounded. Bye.
Bye.